Hey there. Have you ever thought about what happens when your body's own security system, your immune system, gets a call and totally overreacts to a false alarm? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. It's this fascinating story about the body building walls against a threat that, well, isn't actually there. We're talking about something called non-caseating granulomas. So, to really get this, let's just imagine your body has its own little security team, on call 24/7. Now, what happens when they get an urgent signal? They scramble to the scene, all geared up for a fight, and there's nothing there. What do they do then? It usually plays out in about 3 steps. First, some kind of mysterious, unknown trigger sets everything off. Then, step 2, the immune system's security team, all these specialized cells, rushes in. But here's the twist. They get there, look around, and they can't find an enemy. So just to be on the safe side, they decide to build a big old containment wall anyway. Now that protective containment wall, it actually has a medical name. It's called a granuloma. It's basically a tiny, super organized collection of immune cells that have walled off an area they think is a threat. It's kind of like the body putting up quarantine tape around a scene that it just can't figure out. But there's a really important detail here, and it's that word non-caseating. This tells you what kind of wall we're talking about. See, this one is a clean, solid structure. It's not messy. Some immune responses leave behind a bunch of debris, this gross, dead, almost cheese-like tissue. But not this one. This is a neat, organized, and, totally unnecessary little fort. So where does all this building happen? Well, one of the main spots is in the lungs. And we're not just talking about one little wall here. Imagine thousands of these tiny fortifications being built, all grouping together in these little clusters all throughout the lung tissue. And how does a doctor actually see this? Well, on a lung scan, you can't see each individual microscopic granuloma. What you can see are the clusters they form. And these clusters, they show up on the scan as inflammatory nodules. It's the visible proof of all that pointless construction going on inside. And just to give you a sense of scale, each one of these nodules is unbelievably small. We are talking about 1 millimeter. That's about the width of the tip of a ballpoint pen. So yeah, they're tiny, but when you get enough of them together, they definitely make their presence known. It turns out this very specific kind of false alarm is the absolute hallmark of a condition called sarcoidosis. In fact, finding these clean, non-caseating granulomas is one of the biggest clues that tells doctors they're probably looking at a case of sarcoidosis. Okay, so this leads to a pretty logical question, right? Is this whole thing just a lung problem, or can these false alarms pop up in other parts of the body? And the answer is, it is absolutely a systemic issue. While the lungs are the #1 spot, these granulomas can form all over. In your lymph nodes, your skin, your eyes, and even in the adrenal glands. It's actually one of the less common causes of a condition called Addison disease. The body's security team is basically on high alert everywhere. All right, so let's just recap the whole chain of events real quick. Some unknown trigger kicks off an immune response. That response builds thousands of these tiny, clean containment walls, these non-caseating granulomas. And while it can happen all over the body, it's most often seen in the lungs, where all those little clusters show up on scans as inflammatory nodules. And all of this brings us to the biggest question of all, the real mystery here. We get the how, we can see the cells, we see the walls, we see the nodules they create, but the great medical puzzle that's still left is the why. What in the world is setting off that very first false alarm? And that's the trigger scientists are still hunting for today.